carefully, because what you're about to hear was never meant to reach you. Most people think the wilderness is empty, quiet, pure, a place where a man escapes the noise of civilization and reconnects with something real. That's the story we're told. But the woods have never been empty. Long before roads cut through mountains and national parks claimed the land, people disappeared there. Hunters vanished. Travelers walked into the trees and never came back out. Entire search parties returned with the same explanation whispered around campfires. Something wasn't right out there. Tonight, you're going to hear 3 true hiking horror stories. On the surface, they sound like random encounters, bad luck, strange people in the woods. But if you listen closely, a darker pattern begins to emerge. Because the wilderness isn't just nature, it's territory. And every territory belongs to someone. Sometimes it's animals. Sometimes it's people who live so far outside society that the rules you know no longer apply. And sometimes it's something far older than both. The first man in this story had been hiking alone for 6 years, long enough to feel confident, long enough to stop sticking to marked trails. That's usually the moment things start going wrong. It happened in October inside a remote part of a massive forest in West Virginia. The weather was perfect, cool, quiet, the kind of overcast sky that makes the woods feel deeper than they really are. He had been hiking for about 4 hours when he reached a gorge. Not a massive canyon, but deep enough that a fall would break bones. 30, maybe 40 feet down to rocks and a narrow creek cutting through the bottom. The only way across was a massive fallen oak tree wedged between both sides like a natural bridge. He checked it carefully. The bark was worn smooth with weather and probably other hikers crossing it over the years. It looked solid enough. So he stepped onto it, balancing carefully as he crossed. Every step over that drop sent adrenaline through his chest. But he made it. He stepped safely onto the other side and laughed to himself at the rush. Then he heard a sound behind him. A slow, rhythmic thunk. He turned around, and on the other side of the gorge, standing about 10 feet from the fallen tree, was a man holding a full-sized axe. The man looked like he belonged to the woods. Old camo jacket, torn jeans, thick, scraggly beard. The kind of face you'd expect to see chopping firewood in some remote cabin deep in the mountains. But he wasn't chopping wood for warmth. Without saying a word, the man walked straight to the base of the fallen oak tree and started swinging the axe. The hiker froze for a second, trying to process what he was seeing. Each swing sent a dull thud through the forest. Wood chips splintered from the trunk. The tree that had just carried him across the gorge was now being hacked apart. "Hey!" he shouted across the gap. "What the hell are you doing?" The man didn't even look up. He just kept swinging. The realization hit like ice water down his spine. The man had seen him cross, and now he was cutting the bridge behind him. "Stop!" he yelled. "I just crossed that." Another swing, a deeper crack in the wood. The tree shifted slightly in its wedge between the cliffs. The hiker felt anger rising, but underneath the anger was something else, something colder.
This wasn't random. The man knew exactly what he was doing. He was trapping him on the wrong side of the gorge. The hiker started shouting insults across the gap, anything to make the guy stop, but the axe kept rising and falling with slow, deliberate rhythm. Finally, he yelled, "I have to cross back that way!" That's when the man finally stopped. He rested the axe on the ground and stepped closer to the edge of the gorge. Now the hiker could see his face clearly. Sunken eyes, dark circles around them like bruises, a blank expression that didn't match the situation at all. Then the man said something in a calm, almost casual voice. "That's not my problem." No anger, no threat, just a statement. The kind of tone someone uses when they're telling you something that has already been decided. The hiker felt his stomach tighten, because in that moment he realized something worse than being stranded. The man wasn't surprised to see him there. It almost felt like he'd been expecting him, like the trap had been waiting long before he arrived. Eventually, the man picked up the axe, turned around, and disappeared into the trees without another word. Just like that. No explanation, no warning. The hiker stood there, staring at the damaged tree, trying to figure out what had just happened. The bridge was still technically wedged in place, but now there were deep, splintered cuts on the other side. Trusting it with his weight again would be gambling with his life. He pulled out his phone. No signal. Of course. So he made a decision. He would follow the gorge downstream until he found another crossing. At first it seemed logical. Waterways usually narrow somewhere. But after 30 minutes of walking, the gorge only got deeper. The walls became steeper. Loose rock crumbled along the edges. The drop below widened until it looked impossible to climb down safely. An hour passed, still no crossing, and the sun was starting to fall toward the horizon. That's when panic started creeping in. He realized something disturbing. If that man truly knew the woods better than him, then he also knew this gorge had no easy crossings nearby, which meant the trap wasn't just about breaking the bridge. It was about forcing him deeper into unfamiliar territory. Eventually, the hiker came across something unexpected, a campsite. At first, he felt relief. Another person might mean help. But the closer he looked, the stranger things became. The trees around the clearing were carved with deep symbols, not initials, not normal trail markings. Strange shapes cut deliberately into the bark. Pieces of cloth tied to branches. Rusted tools scattered in the dirt. Animal bones arranged in patterns around a fire pit. It didn't look like a campsite. It looked like a place built for something else, something old, and something very intentional. That's when he started hearing footsteps behind him. But first, the footsteps were faint, just the sound of leaves shifting somewhere behind him. He stopped walking. The sound stopped. He started moving again. The footsteps returned, slow, measured, matching his pace through the trees. A cold wave of awareness rolled through him. Something was following. He spun around several times, but saw nothing except tall trunks and gathering shadows between them. The forest was growing darker now. Every sound echoed louder. Branches snapping, wind brushing through dead leaves. Then it happened. He turned around one more time and caught a glimpse of someone ducking behind a tree. A person. His pulse exploded. He scanned the woods more carefully, and that's when he saw the second figure, further to the left. They weren't hiding very well anymore. They were spreading out, like hunters surrounding prey. The realization hit him instantly. They were herding him. And suddenly, the footsteps were no longer subtle. Branches snapped openly, heavy steps pushed through the underbrush. One of them was holding something long in their hands, a pipe or a club. That's when instinct took over. He ran, full sprint through uneven forest ground, branches whipping against his arms and face. Behind him he could hear them crashing through the trees, no longer bothering with stealth. Then one of them started screaming, not words, just loud, primal screams that echoed through the woods like a war cry. The kind of sound meant to break your mind before anything else happens. The gorge was still beside him, and just as exhaustion started burning through his legs, he saw something ahead, another fallen tree, smaller than the first one, but still crossing the gorge. He didn't hesitate. He jumped onto it and started crossing, because behind him the screams were getting closer.
The fallen tree shook under his weight as he rushed across. Below him, the gorge dropped into darkness. One wrong step and he'd fall onto the rocks 30 feet below. But adrenaline kept him moving. He reached the other side and stumbled onto solid ground. Then he turned around. 3 figures had reached the edge of the gorge. They looked almost identical to the first man he had seen earlier. Same filthy clothes, same hollow expressions. One of them stepped forward and placed a hand on the fallen tree like he was considering crossing. For a moment, nobody moved. The forest had gone completely silent. Then the man stepped back again. All 3 of them just stared across the gorge at him. Not angry, not frustrated, just watching. Finally, one of them spoke. "Get out of here." The voice was flat and emotionless. "You got lucky." Those 4 words echoed in the hiker's mind like a warning. He didn't argue. He didn't ask questions. He turned around and ran. Through the darkening forest, through rising panic, through miles of unfamiliar terrain, until somehow, almost miraculously, he reached the trailhead again. He drove home shaking. He reported what happened, but nothing ever came from it. No investigation, no explanation, just silence. But one detail never left his mind. The man with the axe had told him something before walking away. "I know these woods a lot better than you do." And the more the hiker thought about it, the more it felt like the encounter hadn't been random at all. It felt planned, like he had walked into someone else's territory and barely made it back out alive. But the next story proves something even more disturbing, because sometimes even the predators of the forest are afraid of what lives deeper inside it. 3 years before this story was told, another man was hiking alone through a remote forest in northern Minnesota. He preferred true wilderness. No trails, no markers, just raw land stretching for miles. But after 4 hours of walking, he realized something every experienced hiker fears. He was lost. The trees all looked the same. The sun gave him only a vague direction. Every step deeper made the woods feel heavier around him. Then he heard something behind him,
rustling leaves. He stopped. The sound stopped. He walked again. It followed. At first he assumed it was a deer, but deer don't track humans like that. Then, suddenly the rustling erupted all around him, and he found himself surrounded. 6, maybe 7 wolves stepped out from the trees, some snarling, some watching silently. He slowly pulled out his knife, knowing the odds were impossible. A pack of wolves doesn't surround something unless they intend to kill it. He braced himself, but then something strange happened. Every wolf suddenly froze. Their ears lifted. All of them turned their heads towards something behind him. And then they ran. Not cautiously, not slowly. They fled at full sprint, like something far worse had just entered the forest. The woods went silent. No birds, no wind, nothing. The hiker slowly turned around, and in the distance he saw a clearing. Inside that clearing were carved symbols in the trees, bones hanging from branches, strange objects scattered around a fire pit, and floating 6 feet above the ground, a thick cloud of black smoke, not rising, not drifting, just hanging there, perfectly still. He stared at it for several minutes, unable to look away. Then a terrible feeling built inside his chest. Grief, terror, like something awful was about to happen, even though it hadn't yet. Finally, his instincts screamed one command: run. He ran until he reached his car. But later, something bothered him more than the wolves, more than the clearing, more than the smoke. His memory. A full hour of what happened next was completely gone. And if there's one rule experienced hunters know, it's that wolves don't fear easily. So if an entire pack ran from something in those woods, you have to ask the question most people don't want answered. What kind of presence could make predators feel like prey? And how many places like that still exist, hidden deep inside the forests of this world, waiting for the next man who wanders too far off the trail?